I remember back in October 1992 when I got my hands on White Dwarf issue 154, how excited I was. They had announced Warhammer Fantasy 4th edition, and this time it was going to be a box game with miniatures. In the next issue 155 there was a huge battle report by Nigel Stillman in which the High Elves took on the Goblins in a matchup from the box itself. My memory's a little hazy about when I got my hands on the box. I'm sure it involved doing lots and lots of extra chores around the house as I was only 14 at the time. But look at all of that goodness inside. It may well have been one of the only starter boxes of any game system where I can honestly say hand on heart that I painted everything inside. Sadly, I don't have my set anymore. That's long gone, and this box here is a battered old eBay rescue that I managed to pick up for very, very cheap as a bit of a nostalgia buy. But there's still plenty of miniatures inside, and it's been really fun looking through the old rules. There's a few little bits missing here and there, but that's not really the point of this video. I'm in this box looking for the subject of today's painting tutorial. And here he is, one classic plastic archer from the starter set. My name's Stuart, welcome to Miniature Realms. The miniature has been primed black and given a very heavy zenithal highlight top down using white. I've added some extra attention making sure that I get the kind of skirts and the arms nice and flat white because this is going to be one of the main colours of the miniature. So cracking straight into the colours, I'm going to start with Dwarf Skin from Express Colour by Vallejo. This is their answer to contrast paint, and very good it is as well. I'm looking forward to the range expanding. And the method here is to apply a fairly thick coat of this paint, allowing it to pool in all the recesses, giving us some shadow and some highlight over this nearly white primed miniature. Next up, we are starting on that white and sticking with Vallejo Express Colour, so using their medium and their white, a 50-50 mix. I'm applying this over all the areas of the miniature that I'd like to be white fabric, so that is essentially the sleeves that are showing and the skirts around the bottom. Having smoothed those out and make sure that none of the pooling areas are too messy, I add some to the bow as well, because back in those classic paint schemes, the bow was made out of white painted wood. So keeping the colours nice and bright, and this is Contrast Ayandan Yellow from Citadel, and I'm using this around the waistband or belt. I really want to keep a nice, vibrant theme attuned to something you may be found in the early to mid 90s. Continuing the yellow onto the emblem at the front of the quiver, and also using for the overstrap and his little man bag. Again, taking reference from those original paint schemes, I'm using some Contrast Blood Angels Red for a couple of elements on the miniature. So we have this red motif or raised area on the front of the helmet, some detailing on the bow, and a large part of the main body of the quiver. Decided to make this chap a redhead, so I'm using some contrast Gore Grunter fur for the base. Heading over now to some contrast Garagak Sewer, my trusty go-to brown. This is perfect for the boots and the shafts of the arrows themselves. Sticking with Citadel contrast, we're going for some Celestium blue here, and this is for certain areas on the clothing. So we have the blue on the cuffs, some blue edges to the armour, and some blue detailing around the bottom of the quiver. Now I've decided to go for some dark feathers on the top of the arrows, and I'm going to be using Black Lotus from Vallejo, but you could opt for the Citadel contrast black as well. So getting close to the end of the base coats here, we're going to Black Metal from Scale Colour, and this is going to be the base for all the silver areas. Trying to be nice and neat here. I'm trying to keep this paint scheme fairly neat and tidy and clean, and I really don't want to mess up that white. So I'm just taking my time and working my way around all the silver areas, not forgetting the helmet and all the raised areas that will eventually be gems. Scale colour again, I'm just using a little bit of Necro Gold to pick out the earrings so they're not the same colour as the other metallics. And we have a pretty tidy tabletop miniature should you wish to stop there, but as always we will carry on and highlight all these further. So I decided to start with the metallic highlighting this time, and this is Game Air Silver, a really nice bright silver. And what I'm going to do here is go around and individually dapple on a little dot on all of the scales. The scales on this miniature are quite large and easy to get to. You could speed this up just by doing a gentle dry brush. If you did that, you might want to do this before you've done some of the other colours, because if you get something on the blue or the white or something, and then you'll have a little bit of a harder job to tidy it up. So don't forget to highlight the helmet as well. I'm working at the top here. I'm just using a little bit of water to feather out and blend into the lower areas, creating a bit of shadow. I didn't want to use any washes on this miniature or dirty it down. I'm also highlighting those little areas that will become gems later on. This will really help with the final application of paint on them. Now it's time to highlight those boots. I'm going to be using Vallejo Model Colour Flat Earth. And while I've got the paint on the brush, just a really subtle overbrush onto the shafts of the arrows. I'm just painting rather thick edge highlights at the moment, making sure I'm leaving some of the darker colours still on the miniature. Now it's time to highlight the reds, and we're going to start with Leia Evil Sun Scarlet from Citadel Colour. Now, using a 50-50 mix of Evil Sun Scarlet and Wild Rider Red, I increase the amount of highlights with a slightly thinner line, and then finishing with a final touch of Wild Rider Red on its own afterwards. To highlight the blue, I'm starting with Model Colour Royal Blue from Vallejo. Taking my time, making sure I leave some of the darker colour in the recesses, and really just sort of picking it out at 80% of the raised areas. Then, a bit like the red, I'm using a 50-50 mix, this time joined in turquoise along with the blue, mix it in and then do a slightly thinner line on all the blue areas, leaving a little bit of both previous shades showing. You can always finish up with just a little bit of the top highlight of blue just on its own if you should wish to really make it pop. Now on to Citadel Colour Phalanx Yellow. This is perfect to highlight the yellow we've already got in place. Being very subtle here, just a couple of thin lines either side of the straps and belt, and then I'm very, very neat with the emblem on the front of the quiver, and don't forget his little man bag again. To highlight the hair, I'm going to use some Model Colour Light Brown. This has got quite an orange tone to it, so I'm just trying to pick out a few strands just to make them stand out a little more. Now back to Model Colour, and this is White Grey. This is a bit of a new discovery for me, this colour over the last few months. I just hadn't got around to using it before. And there's something with white properties. Whites are often problematic and chalky, and this is a very, very smooth paint that thins exceptionally well with just a little bit of water. I start off just by adding a few faint dots to what will be gems later on, and that will really help for that final stage, before moving on to slowly highlighting all the white clothing. I really am just building up on these highest areas here. I don't want to obliterate what was achieved with the white contrast paint before. I was very, very careful to make sure that any pooling was where I wanted it to, and it was smooth. And this, you're just really, really sort of subtly accentuating and bringing those top light areas up to a slightly brighter whiteness. Having done all the clothing, making sure I do the sleeves as well, I move on to the bow itself, just using the edge of the brush to rub along the side, the sharp edge of the inside of the bow, really makes it pop and stand out. Then towards the tips of the bow, I add a little bit more of the white grey and then blend it in as we go up, just to give a subtle change in colour along the length of the bow itself. Then, in an effort to really make it stand out, I'm using Model Colour Off-White, and I'm mixing this with a little bit of medium, because this one, while it's a good paint, does tend to suffer a little bit more than the white grey. And again, very similar to before, very, very thin lines this time, even slightly thinner, just picking out those topmost parts of detail on the miniature when the folds of the fabric hit the light. And then again, a similar process on the bow as we did before, this time just covering slightly less of the miniature. Using a little bit of Vallejo Deep Purple now. I'm using 1 part Deep Purple to 4 parts water here, so quite thin. I'm just adding it into some of the recesses on the flesh, a little bit around the knuckles and between the fingers, around the cuffs, in the ears, around the lower part of the face. some scale colour elven gold here. I just want to put a little dot on each of the earrings to highlight the more darker desaturated necro gold that we started with. Now, to save a little time, I decided to add some Agrax Earthshade to the basing mix that was now fully dried on the base, so that when I'd finished the miniature, it was ready to go for me to add those final touches. Now, to highlight the skin, I'm using model colour basic skin with a mix of medium, again about 50-50 here. A nice thin layer just where the light would hit the miniature most, picking out knuckles on the hands and a little layer along the top finger, and then I repeat this around the nose and the tops of the cheeks. Again, I'm not really trying to do too much here. I don't want to paint over all the work that the Express colours done over the white anyway. The skin was quite well defined just by the kind of glaze areas I'd already done, but this just makes it pop and stand out even more. Now, using the technical paint Spirit Zone Red, you can use contrast paints for this as well and add a little bit of gloss afterwards, but I'm going to go over all of those gems just with a dollop of this. I could have painted on the gems manually with a nice little highlight using orange and things like that, but I really wanted a quick paint job here. Now that thin layer of Agrax Earthshade has dried, I'm able to brush in a little bit of dry pigment. This is light sienna, and add in a few tufts, finishing with a nice white flower. The black rim, I know a goblin green base would have been perfect here, but I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And there we have it, one finished 4th edition plastic High Elf Archer from the starter set. Now, it's been over 30 years since I last painted one of these as a teen, and I probably enjoyed it more this time round in many ways. Definitely learnt a little bit over the years, and it was fun trying to paint it in this nice bright scheme. It's not the way I often do things. I definitely wouldn't be painting yellow man bags and things on miniatures, but I really wanted to give a little nod to the style of painting at the time, even if it wasn't an exact copy. Well, let me know what you think, and if you've enjoyed the video, please do give it a like. It definitely helps me out. And if you'd like to see me paint more old miniatures like this, let me know. I may well do a few more along the way. I do like painting new miniatures as well, so it won't be something I just do, but it was a fun way of adding a high elf for this little series on the old world that I'm doing. If you really like looking at sort of old Hammer miniatures painted, do check out Anvil of Doom Miniatures. Dietz does a fantastic job replicating some of the styles and things back from the day, and I love watching his videos, so go and check him out. I've got lots more Warhammer the Old World / Warhammer Fantasy content planned and on the way, along with many other things as well. So if you are interested, consider giving the channel a subscription if you haven't already. I'm definitely going to continue this series of painting individual troops from the Warhammer armies. I've got quite a few more to do. I'm not sure which the next one's going to be. I think it might be Beastmen, looking at my little list, but it probably a couple of weeks down the line. I've got some Mordheim themed videos coming up as well, and one of those is heavily linked to my old world Bretonnian army. So there's a bit of an interlaced lore thing going on there, and you'll have to find out that in that future video coming up. But let's just say the castle is involved as well, and there'll be lots more terrain as well as miniatures. But thank you very much for watching. Take care, and I'll catch you soon.